If you've been following my channel for a little while, you know that oftentimes my expectations of a particular book can impact, usually negatively, my review of the book. And so I wanted to share with you guys some recent reads that have surprised me in a good way. And these are all books that I recommend, so let's get to it. So let's get this started off right. Alastair Reynolds, who I'm really scared to say is an author that I just thought wasn't for me. I read House of Suns and I didn't love it like everyone else did. I felt very meh about it, but I gave him another chance by recently picking up the book Pushing Ice. And this book, it was a standalone and it just happened to be available at the library, so I grabbed it. And I was so pleasantly surprised. So this book features a mining crew in the future whose job it is to push ice and or mine ice from asteroids around our solar system. And they're asked to follow Janus, a moon of Saturn who has recently just picked up and taken off and is headed out of our solar system, identifying itself as an alien object that has been monitoring us right under our noses. So Captain Bella decides to put it to a vote of her crew, and they decide to go ahead and follow it out of the solar system, intending on taking a bunch of pictures and getting data before it leaves the Milky Way. And of course, they accidentally get trapped in its interstellar wake, going faster than light outside of our solar system. Now, as you can imagine, this is a fantastic plot and full of lots of action. I really enjoyed it. It also balances character relationships, and it focuses on the relationship of Captain Bella and her relationship with her then best friend Svetlana, who is the chief engineer. And their friendship is really put to the test when they find themselves with opposite opinions of what they should do. And it is a power struggle between these two women almost the entire story. I really enjoyed how this story was told. I understand that it wasn't for everyone, but I really cared about the friendship between the two women. I just related to it so well. I found the story well paced and interesting, lots of really good science, and I really recommend this one. It was a great little standalone that did convert me to Alastair Reynolds, finally! So I'm really excited to pick up some of his other standalones and very cautiously explore some of his backlist work. The very next book on this list is going to be one that some of you might have heard of, Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. This is a book that was very popular a couple of years ago, and I wasn't really sure that I wanted to check it out until I found out that there was a movie that's coming out next year in 2025. This follows a man named Mickey who volunteers to be a replacement on a space mission that's going out for exploration. And of course, this is a spot that nobody wants because Mickey is volunteering to be the ultimate red shirt, and he is going to be replaceable. So every time a dangerous mission comes up, he's the one that has to go out and die, and then his consciousness gets reloaded into a new body, and he carries on from there. However, Mickey number 7 gets in quite a debacle and they leave him for dead, and lo and behold, Mickey 7 actually makes it back to base. He survives, but the crew didn't know, and they have already had Mickey 8 cooking. So Mickey 8 comes out right when Mickey 7 makes it back to base, and of course, he can't really kill himself either way it goes, and yet he knows if he turns himself in, they will kill him anyway. So, what to do?
What to do? What to do? What to do?
It's a fun, interesting little story that I didn't expect to like as much as I did. I like that it had the sarcasm that I got from Andy Weir's Mark Watney on The Martian. I just really enjoyed his sarcastic, smarmy personality. So if you're a huge fan of those kinds of characters, like I am, you might really find out that you enjoy Mickey 7. The next book on this list is an older one. This one is called Healer's War by Elizabeth Scarborough. This is a standalone book that I've heard some rumblings about on Reddit, and I wanted to give it a shot. It is a military science fiction novel, only it's told from the perspective of a volunteer army nurse during the time of Vietnam. Now, what's really interesting about the story is I think these are the memoirs that are reflected from the author herself, because she was also in the Vietnam War as a nurse, I believe. So this was a really interesting, shockingly accurate story of what she would have experienced in this situation, where no matter what happens, she's trying to protect her patients, and yet some of her patients are the natives. And in a war where there is no winning side and everyone hates each other, the people who lose out the most are those who cannot defend themselves. And so this is really where her story begins. She has quite a lot of action in this story, although I'm not sure it is officially military sci-fi, because she doesn't really get to experience any battles as she is a healthcare worker. There is also a supernatural element to the story, maybe to make it a little bit more palpable. She does have some magical abilities that allow her to heal, but I gotta say, as somebody in the healthcare field, this is a book that I found incredibly engaging and very accurate, and it really surprised me how much I liked this book. So if you're somebody who doesn't mind some of those harrowing war tales, and you're in for some of the goriness of the healthcare side of things, this book might be something you would really love. However, remember that it is more of a memoir, and it is more about the main character and her feelings and opinions than it is a story about action and the war and whether that should or should not have happened. So, not a Slaughterhouse-Five kind of story, but definitely one that you should consider checking out. The next one on this list is also an older book. This one is called Where Late the Sweet Birds Sang by Kate Wilhelm. This is a book that I picked up. Essentially, it won the Hugo and the Locust and the Jupiter Award all in 1977.
No way!
I went into it sort of with low expectations, and boy did it blow me out of the water. This is a very interesting, thoughtful, dystopian world where we have a world that is waning in its reproductive abilities. And so humans are searching for alternatives. And our main character, David, happens to discover that cloned animals still retain their reproductive abilities. And so in a last-ditch, desperate effort, humans have decided to create a society of human clones. And so they produce them in batches because they're trying to reproduce and repopulate the world. And then slowly over time, they realize that this has actually created a communal society. And the batches of clones of the same person have really developed an unnatural connection with each other and are unable to be separated. This really changes society as a whole, and yet it's too late to fix anything. So the second half of this book really switches main characters, and we follow and explore this society through the eyes of a woman named Molly, and eventually her young son, Marcus. This book was different than what I expected, and is a book that really should be considered a little bit more of a dystopian classic. I felt like it was somewhat in the same vein as We, although it had a lot more character building and a little bit less thought-provoking, paved the way kind of a situation. I do feel like this one was a worthy Hugo winner though, and I really found myself enjoying it. This is a book that could have been written just a few years ago. So if you're down for dystopia and you like some thought experiments, this is a book to check out. The next book on our list is the ultimate thought experiment. Maybe not the ultimate one, but really influential. Ministry of the Future. This book I pick up a little bit apprehensively, and it follows the thought question of what would it actually take for humans to care about global warming? What would it take for action to actually happen? This book really explores all those possibilities, including things like creating a government branch around the world for all major governments called the Ministry for the Future that requires them to run all laws through the Ministry for the Future to see if the laws will help the future or not. Now, I think that's an interesting idea, but just like many other government programs, it's a little bit of an impotent problem. And as time goes on, they really start to discover how things are actually done in the world and how we could actually make the world's government and its people care about global warming. And it's definitely not a one secret answer fits all. There's multiple factors in this book. There are so many different ideas, and it's very info dumpy. There's a lot of technical jargon in here. There's no true one main character thread to pull you through, but I found myself riveted the entire time. I guess it's because I somehow cared about this topic, and the way that Stanley writes really makes you care about the topic. But I felt like this was reading an entertaining textbook, if that's possible. I don't know, but I was really surprised by this book. I found it to be very hopeful. I found it to be very insightful and interesting. I learned a lot when reading this novel. I do think I agree that not all of these would have worked exactly, but I do think it is a story worth reading if you really want to know how policy could change for the better. And you may not like the answer. Definitely one that deserves to be discussed. Now, the next book on this list is one I'm really surprised to include, but I did pick it up at the request of one of my family members who begged me to read it, and that is one of Goodreads' Choice Awards, Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is not one of those books that I thought that I would like. It's a little bit more present day, and there isn't tons of sci-fi elements or even fantasy elements. It's really more of a contemporary story. It follows two best friends who are living in California, and it's their dream goal to create a video game. And one of them is the game programmer, and the other person is the designer and the story writer. And together they make a very successful game, and it's really about their friendship and the trials and tribulations as they achieve the fame that they set out to get, and yet how that can then pull them apart and bring them together throughout their lifetime. There are many, many things about this story that made me feel actual emotions. Damn! And it was really a touching story where I was rooting for these two friends to really come back together and be friends, even though they have been constantly pulled back and forth throughout the rest of the story. I'm really surprised to say I really recommend this story, even though it's not my usual genre that I love. It does have a little bit more of the technology and the video games, the video game industry in here, and that made it a little bit more palpable for science fiction. But this was ultimately a story about the two characters and their friendship. And again, it was just very, very well done. So if that's something that you would like, definitely take a look at this one. Now, the next book is one that is juicy drama / unpopular opinions. I don't know what to do with this. This book is called Pastwatch: The Redemption of Christopher Columbus by Orson Scott Card. So, the juicy unpopular opinion is, I really liked this book, and yet I found that its message of tolerance and love of all people, regardless of what they look like or their background, to be completely opposite of what I know about this author and what he's said about the gay and LGBT community. And now I am not really sure what to do. Let me tell you about this story. So this one takes place in the future where time travel finally exists, but we can only watch the past. We can't really interact with it. And one historian gets absolutely obsessed with following her family line and trying to discover why her family is fated into sadness. And through a lot of research, she ends up discovering, or thinking that she discovers, that Christopher Columbus and his mission to the Americas are the cause of her family's problems. And because of her obsession, she accidentally lands on a way to very mildly influence the past, including things like dreams and hallucinations, and she and her partner decide to go out and try to change the result of Christopher Columbus's mission. Now, this book is a two-perspective story. So the first perspective is we're following the historian and her partner as they're trying to influence the past. And the second perspective is following Christopher Columbus himself as he is trying to push Queen Isabella into funding his mission. There are so many things about Christopher Columbus's life that I learned. A lot of things about the story humanized him to me, but I also thought it was a really interesting story pushing things like tolerance and love, and it was a lot about forgiveness and a lot about acceptance. And I just have a really hard time making this meet with what I understand about Orson Scott Card. So that's why this book is on my most surprising reads, and I really, really liked it, but I also don't know if I can recommend it because of what he said in the past, so I don't really know what to do with this story. So if you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments section down below. So that does it for my surprising recent reads. Most of these were really good surprises, and if you have any good surprise reads that you've been reading lately, I would love for you to come chat with me on Discord to talk about them, or leave me a comment in the comment section down below. Always interested in your opinions, and until next time, you guys, see ya next video.